Hello, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning on this special day today. I'm very excited, and I'm sure Kwame is as excited as I am. Today is particularly we're happy because BRICS have admitted 6 new members, and from Africa, Ethiopia, and Egypt have made it. So, as an Ethiopian, I'm very happy, but even I am very more happy as an African. For this achievement, and outcomes of we planned it long before, but what an interesting thing to talk about. We are here to spill everything that's related to BRICS. It has been concluded today. There are many things to touch. So the divisions, the unity, the decisions that they have made in terms of admission, the one which are pending that they have not taken a decision. So we're gonna touch each and everything. So as usual, we have here Kwame Gonza with us. Welcome, Kwame.
Thank you very much, Mahlet. I hope you can hear me.
Loud and clear. Yeah, very well.
Very well. Regards to everyone who's watching the channel. Today is a very special day, like Mahlet mentioned. BRICS has been, the historical BRICS summit was held in South Africa, definitely. And whatever, we have been talking about, what has been the cry of our hearts, actually, many of those things have started coming to pass. The fact that South Africa was supposed to hold it together and insist that it has the right to host this summit and insist and do the right thing on behalf of the Global South. All these things have come to pass. And South Africa was able to hold it together, was able to host a tremendously successful, beautiful summit, beautiful organization that happened for this particular BRICS. And it was a huge success, especially for the Global South. We see India also was able to, to support. And when it came to admitting the new members, India too said, we have been for the admission of new members. So these are the things which we want to, to sift through. We want to analyze and then talk about. And then, of course, many of you will be in the comment section. Let us see what you say. Put your suggestions in the comment section. Even if you are not part of this live, you can still put in the comment section, and the chat is there. So make your contribution in there and let us see what we can do and where we are going. And of course, Connect Africa is not just a channel, as we have mentioned consistently. We are an organization that is both engaged in the organization work. And that means we are working with other Pan-African organizations into pushing forward the Pan-African agenda and also working with the progressive African government. So that is the very reason you should support this channel. You should push us forward, unlike other channels which are just talking about things, but there is nothing tangible to show for it. We have shown you that we are engaged in the work, in the real work. We also have a website where you can find our work at connecttoafrica.org, connecttoafrica.org. You can find us there. Mahlet, I would like you to put it in the comment.
I'm doing as you speak.
Yes, so that people can be able to see our website and, different things which we write about the African continent. So this is what we are doing. So this is the very reason you should support this channel. Push it so that the message can be able to go out there. We have many ideas. We have many people, which people who we are working with in order to push this Pan-African agenda. Pan-Africanism is supposed to become a mainstream idea, like how you see the Indians are pushing their ideas. They have a vibrant media right now that even the Indian media, which we are going to come and discuss here on one of the shows. Mahlet, I remember we spoke about this.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to come and discuss the Indian media. The Indian media has started scaring the Western media right now, because the Indians are pushing their narrative. You know, they are becoming unstoppable in every way, to the point that the mainstream media in the Western world, which has been having this huge monopoly over the international media, is terrified, is scared. So the Pan-African media is also supposed to be in the same way. We are supposed to be, you know, thinking in the same way that Pan-Africanism should be a mainstream idea. The Ubuntu philosophy, that I am because you are, should be the dominant idea on the African continent, and the neoliberalism as it comes from the West should be challenged. Africans should challenge, you know, this foreign system that has destroyed our continent. It has brought wars, it has destroyed Libya, it has exploited our continent for the last 600 years. So this is what we have to challenge. And there's no other way of challenging it other than pushing the Pan-African narrative and putting it in the mainstream and say, we are following our own thinking as Africans. The Chinese are also following their own. They have their own media. So for now, as our African continent is still disorganized and is still being dominated by these neo-colonial narratives and systems and World Bank and the media, which is disorganized and doesn't know what is African and what is not African, you have to support these kinds of media like ours and other Pan-African media, you know, houses or platforms. Sister Shani's show, Pan-African Daily TV. These are the Pan-African, you know, media houses you can speak of. So we invite you to hold hands together with us, and then let us embark on this journey of fighting for Africa and making Pan-Africanism a mainstream narrative. So I want to thank you once again, Mahlet, you know, for being the pioneer of starting, you know, this particular platform and informing our people, obviously, as the main objective, and which has gone on to do even greater things as we are engaged in and doing in the background. So
Yeah.
today, as we said, is a day for nothing else but BRICS. We want to examine BRICS, almost 3 days of BRICS, a lot of outcomes, a lot of speeches given. You know, it was almost like another UN. It is being looked at as an alternative to the United Nations. Even the Secretary General of the United Nations, you know, was terrified about what was happening here. People like Isaiah Afwerki, President Isaiah Afwerki of Eritrea, gave a powerful speech. Different powerful speeches were given about the future of the world, about the future of the planet. So you never know. This summit could be the decisive factor in the future of humanity. And we could be deciding the future of humanity in Africa with what happened with BRICS in South Africa.
Yeah.
Back to you.
Definitely, by discussing, we are putting our 2 cents there. So historically, we are not going to ask ourselves that we did not contribute to this. We are sure our family here, all of your ideas, all of your inputs, comments, suggestions, our reading, our planning, coming here, discussing it, all this have an impact. I mean, trust me, if we are able to impact one official out there, if we got a listener, one elder who have had, you know, who has a connection, it is a success. So every day, make sure what you have to do to achieve that Africa that you envision, that we all envision apparently. Yeah, that's why we always tell you, please share this information, this knowledge to people. We are not saying we are 100% right, but we are, you know, we are here based on our readings, and we are very happy also if you have any other view to come and share. So without further ado, let's jump into it now. Out of 40 countries, you heard me right, 40, 7 countries have been selected. It's not a random, obviously. I believe
I think it was 6, right?
It was 6, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you for correcting me. 6 countries have been selected. Not a random. It looks like they're very selective, but they made sure that each continent of the global south have been represented. Just to name them, from Africa, it's Ethiopia, Egypt, then we have Iran, India, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates. Now, why out of these 40 countries, these countries are selected, and what does it mean? It's the implication, from the place where they are coming from, the continent, and then more particularly the geopolitics that they are coming from. Yeah, let's start with that. And please keep on commenting, asking, contributing here in the chat section. All right, let's go. Back to you, Kwame.
Yeah, absolutely. Very interesting. This is like we said, is a very interesting period in history. I remember we've been speaking about a lot of these things. Some of the things we've been analyzing them and putting them here and there, and looking at them from different sides, different points of view. I think that the issue of selection, these countries came together, and you want to give actually credit to South Africa for handling the diplomacy, excellently well. It was so diplomatic for this summit that even to some extent, I was scared whether India and China would be able to hold it together. But we saw President Xi Jinping and, Prime Minister Modi even having a conversation there, as they were walking for the third day, going to take their seats. So it was tremendous. Now, I think that these countries had to agree on the mode, because as they said, that the modalities of admission, the guidelines, the standards, they had to be agreed by majority of the states, even though, of course, we know that at this point, India, China is very, influential in this, that it wants to push this situation in a particular direction. And of course, it is very interested in challenging the Western colonial system, which has been, of course, enslaving majority of humanity. It has been exploiting majority of the, of humans, humanity, majority of the countries across the globe. So China has an interest in challenging that system. And of course, India too has a stake in that, and majority of the other global South countries. But who else is there to lead us better than China? Because it has all the tools. If you are talking about military dominance, it has become very powerful. If you're talking about economic power, it has become very powerful with the GDP of nominal GDP of $19.5 trillion. And if you're talking about GDP in PPP terms, more than is the biggest economy if you're talking about purchasing power. So I think China determined a lot of what happened there, even though I'm not saying that the other African countries or the countries of BRICS, which are part, they did not determine who was to be admitted in this. But I think they were looking at, as you mentioned, from the different parts of the world. As you can see, that the Middle Eastern countries, the Arab countries, have been represented. They admitted around 3 countries. They admitted 3 countries at the same time. You can see that Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, they came in at the same time. And then when we come to Africa, you have Egypt, you have Ethiopia, in addition in addition to South Africa, and Africa also has been able to get 3. When we go to South America, they admitted, Brazil, and of course we already have Argentina, which was admitted together with Iran and Saudi Arabia, and the other group which was admitted recently or just today. So with the admission, I'm assuming that the official or, assuming of their roles of these countries in January, which is, I think they say January 24th, is successful. I'm assuming that there's nothing that is going to stop this process. So that is the point from which I am speaking, because I see that all the countries that were admitted or were told that they are going to assume the roles are very enthusiastic about the process. from the speeches which we are given, but also the whole global south is really very enthusiastic about this process. Even the admitting countries themselves, the BRICS countries, the founding members of BRICS are really also very enthusiastic about this process. So I believe that they wanted to represent the whole, world, all the parts of the world, apart from Europe and the West, which has mostly dominated the mainstream organizations that were formed during the Bretton Woods conference. And of course, we are talking about the United Nations, we are talking about World Bank, we are talking about IMF. And we have been talking about this, or the Global South has been complaining for a long time, since the 60s. Nkrumah himself, when Patrice Lumumba of the Congo was killed, he went to the United Nations in the 60s and demanded for the reform of the United Nations. 1960, he demanded for the reform of the United Nations and asked that Africa be given a seat at the United Nations Security Council as a permanent member. And for the last 60 years, Africa has been demanding the reform of the United Nations, and Africa has not been given. India has been demanding the same thing. It has not been given. So I think that the Global South felt it that these Europeans and Western world who have dominated these institutions and have made them undemocratic, they do not want democracy in these institutions, even though they nag us every day that democracy is everything. Democracy is what produces everything, is what produces all the good things. But we know they did not develop through democracy, as we have seen numerously, even historically. These people, they developed through colonization and slavery and stealing other people's resources. We see that resources from India were stolen. By the time the Europeans went to colonize India, it was one of the richest places on the planet, and they plundered India more than, I hear, about $41 trillion of wealth was extracted from India. When you come to Africa, even artifacts were taken to Europe. Up to date, they don't want to return those things. Africa is the same thing. So they have been lying to us that you develop through democracy, but they do not want the reformation of the United Nations, of the IMF, of World Bank, so that these are democratic institutions. So this is what has driven the people of the Global South to start questioning these people who are talking about democracy, to start questioning these people who are talking about human rights when they are going around the world, killing people, 1 million people in Iraq, Afghanistan chaos. They have brought now their chaos to Africa, which they have been causing in the Middle East. They have decided to cause the same chaos now. They are trying to bring it to Africa, where we are trying also to reject it. So these are the people who are talking about human rights. So these questions have led the Global South to think otherwise. And so we see that the composition of BRICS, at least at its foundations, so far is composed of only the Global South. The Middle East, we know what the West has been doing in the Middle East, and trampling and killing people over there and stealing their resources. Iran, the coups in Iran that happened in the 1950s. Mossadegh, Prime Minister Mossadegh of Iran, who was, removed with the coup. And then we saw Latin America, what they have been doing in Latin America for the last 200 years, disturbing Chile, El Salvador, all these countries, coups. So this is where the people who are composing, who are making the composition of BRICS are coming from. Now we come to Africa, and of course we go to Asia, and I believe that they wanted to admit Indonesia, but I think there was some issues which they said that they should hold on a little bit. But of course Asia already has the juggernauts, almost juggernauts, the titans from Asia. You have China and India, Already these are titans. So I think even for Asia, the two of them are just enough to represent the interests of Asia. So for Africa, I think it is justified. And then for Latin America and the Middle East, these have been mostly the oppressed parts of the world. And of course, how it is going to have an implications on it. I wish I could say that the implication of this arrangement or new global order that we are seeing that is challenging the existing colonial order, I wish I could say that the West will learn from it. But unfortunately, history has shown that dominant powers, they do not learn from it. That is from history. Even Britain, when you go back to the Suez Canal conflict, it was attempting to fight and destroy Egypt under President Abdul Nasser Gamal. Britain was not accepting that it is no more an empire. The countries had gotten their independence. It was still not accepting. So unfortunately, this is the fate. This is the fate of all colonial countries and dominant powers, that they have to be fought. They cannot realize that the time is up. And so that is what we are seeing even with the United States, that it is fighting with everything it has. In Ukraine, the Europeans, together with the United States, the West, the whole West, is fighting with everything it has to keep the order which they put up, their order which they created, and they are dominating. So the only way, unfortunately, is going to be confrontation, is going to be continuous confrontation until the old order is buried. This is what I see, at least from history and how things have been happening with the different empires that have been, overtaken. And so it is likely to be the fate. Of course, there will be gimmicks. The United States will attempt to put up certain gimmicks. We have seen their media, of course, has not commented on the issue extensively. I think they don't want their people to know what is happening. I tried to search for CNN and Fox to see what they are saying about the whole BRICS thing. They are not saying anything. There's no anywhere on YouTube, there's no much say. The only place where I saw that they are talking about it, it was France 24. And, you could see that they are really not happy about it. They are cold, they are worried. You could sense worry in them. So they are seeing that their whole world is melting away. Their whole world is disappearing, the world which they dominated. And these are people who have been telling us that they are rich. They are giving everyone aid. But if we create a fairer world, then why should you be worried? If you are the ones who are rich and you are the ones who are dispensing democracy and human rights everywhere, I think they should not be worried if they are saying that these are the tenets with which they live. They live by justice. And then we are saying we should create a fairer world. We should create a just world. And what we are seeing is that they are worried now. So I think that the destiny, of course, of empires which are failing, the dominant empires which are failing, which are in decay, as historians have rightly mentioned and have put it, is to continue to fight until they are completely decayed and they cannot fight anymore. And of course, history, will bury them, and then a new world order will be definitely created. Of course, over a period of time, because it doesn't happen in one day. Even Britain did not fall in one day. Countries started getting independence here and there, all the way from 1957 in Ghana up to 1994. So it took a long period for that empire to completely be, irrelevant. But even up to today, you can see that Britain still wanted to make itself relevant through the Commonwealth. So that is still going to be the fate of the whole Western civilization.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kwame, for laying out that background, against what backgrounds these countries have been selected, and the implication, of course, towards their continent and the whole geopolitical thing. Now, we do know that sorry, the founding members of BRICS have selected the countries for this reason. But apart from that, these countries also have some commonalities in terms of, where they stand related to the current world order that we have, and they all have been at one point victims of this hegemonic world order that we have, basically led by the United States. Where I am going is now, what I wanted to ask you is, for example, let's take Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia currently, China has tried or made a peace facilitated between Iran and Saudi Arabia, right? And these countries both are oil producers, and the one from Africa, Ethiopia, and Egypt, the GDP that they bring, the natural resources, all of them added together, I think in the next few years, the GDP of BRICS will surpass the one that is existing, or maybe it has passed. I don't know, but I don't want to be optimistic on the things that I haven't done my reading. So, but the thing is, all of them, like at some point, like Saudi Arabia, for example, the U.S. is trying now to downplay Saudi Arabia's big involvement in BRICS. They are talking different things, and I think one of their officials, the U.S. official, is supposed to go visit Saudi Arabia, and then they're saying peace between Israel and Saudi. Like they're downplaying Saudi Arabia's involvement in BRICS. Now, do we have to be, or does BRICS have to be careful in terms of its members choosing their partners? Or since it is a multipolarism, everyone has a right to be everywhere. How does this thing work? What's your comment on this?
Yeah, I think that actually on that point, of course, to some extent, the interests have to be, aligned very well. And this is something which we spoke about when it comes to India, about we spoke about how India was trying to approach the BRICS issue, because we were quite confused whether India is really interested in BRICS or is trying to play BRICS against the United States. But this has become very clear. There's going to be situations where there will be a little bit of maybe sort of like confusion about what is happening because of diplomacy. And actually, in many cases, that is how diplomacy works. But it has become very clear that majority of these countries which are joining, when you look at, for example, Iran really is tired. It has been struggling with this imperialism for almost 100 years, ever since its independence. They have been going in and destabilizing the country and, overthrowing governments. This one comes in, a good leader comes in, like, for example, Mossadegh, Prime Minister Mossadegh. He comes in and they overthrow him, and then they bring their own. And all this is because of the resources. So even in Saudi Arabia itself, when you look at its standing, its position right now, how it is approaching the situation, ever since when it started striking out an independent foreign policy, which is independent from the United States and its dictates. You can see that it is ready. Saudi Arabia itself is ready to defend itself. And when you look at Argentina also, to a certain extent, Argentina also has been struggling to disconnect itself from institutions like the IMF and the World Bank, because these have been imposing austerity measures. Brazil, of course, in South America, that one we know it very well. And Egypt, recently, you remember, it has been critical of the World Bank and the IMF, that it wanted to borrow money from the IMF, and the conditionalities were really unfavorable and unacceptable, to the point that Egypt said that we have to join BRICS and get money from there. We cannot accept these kind of things. And these all, I think, they lead us to the understanding that, and of course, I've not spoken about Ethiopia. We already know about Ethiopia, how it has been struggling with neocolonialism. They wanted to overthrow the government, you know, in Ethiopia. And one of the things which we have mentioned before I come to the conclusion of that point is that whenever an African country is trying to do well, the West always comes in and interrupts that process, because economists like Dambisa Moyo have said that if you want an economy to grow and double, you know, its size, it has to grow by at least 7% over a consistent period. So whenever we see that Africa, you remember that Africa, we have been saying it is growing very fast, you know, in the past years, but when it was growing, then you have these interruptions with COVID, of course, which many people are saying that this was this is something which was planted, but all these, you can see that they are strategies to try to slow down Africa. And you can see the interruption of Ethiopia when it was growing. Before the COVID period, Ethiopia was the fastest growing economy on the African continent. And then the war came. And then the West started supporting the Tigray people who are disturbing the country. So now you see that the growth is slowed down, is interrupted. Now, when you come back, figures just came out a few days ago, this week, that now Ethiopia needs about $20 billion for reconstruction. Now, infrastructure has been destroyed. Now, so all these are process of slowing you down. Now, this was just to put just a little bit of light on Ethiopia as a country, which has also joined. Now, when you put these countries together, this group of countries together, which have joined, they all really have a huge interest in keeping with BRICS and staying there, because they have all struggled. They have all seen what it is to struggle against imperialism, against the interruptions by the West. So this is what I would say, that it is a timely intervention by BRICS, and it is actually no accident. And I think that China has really played this game very well. And India also has been very helpful in this situation. We mentioned that India needs to align its interests very well to understand the interests of the global South and its own interests as a country. Of course, India has ambitions, and Prime Minister Modi, of course, you want to give him credit. He has been really moving India rapidly in the direction of advancing forward. He mentioned that India in a few years is going to be around $5 trillion. The economy is growing rapidly and is actually the fastest growing economy right now in the world, and is a BRICS economy. Of course, when we look at BRICS, its economy is bigger right now than the G7. So it makes it the biggest association. You know, the economy right now, with the added countries of Saudi Arabia and Iran and Argentina, you know, Ethiopia, that means the BRICS economy has reached a point of almost more than, I think, more than 31%. And the G7 economy is less than 30%. So the BRICS economy has already surpassed the G7 with the addition of the countries which have jumped on board. So these countries all have a stake in staying in the BRICS and maintaining it. And all of them, the good thing that is evident today is that they have recognized that the world has to change. We cannot have a few people dominating the whole world and exploiting everyone's resources and playing us against each other. You see, you can talk of the issue between China and India. I believe that China and India, if they sit together, they can be able to iron out these differences of the border where they have been having a lot of confrontation. If India and China really sit down, they will be able to have agreement on this issue. And actually, most of these, they were brought about by colonialism, these differences in borders, by Britain, who was there colonizing India. So this is where these differences, majority of them, you see that they came from the issues with which India has with Pakistan, It is the British who brought these things of separating countries and drawing borders and issues like that. So I think that if they sit together, they will be able to overcome these problems and talk them out. And all this is good if we constantly talk to each other. If countries in BRICS themselves talk to each other, constantly communicate, instead of staying the other side, and then another one will stay on the other side. And the colonialists and the imperialists, of course, they see this as an opportunity to play one country against each other. As we have seen that India and China, of course, came to this summit when the tensions were quite high. You could see them. Even you could see the sitting arrangement that, you know, South Africa arranged them as a host, arranged these sitting arrangements in such a way that President Xi will not be very close, will be on one side, and then, you know, Prime Minister Modi will be on the other side. But at the end of the day, on the third day, you could see that President Xi Jinping of China and Prime Minister Modi are talking. So I think that this is a very sign, and these countries have a stake in these BRICS, and China has really played a very big role, as well as India. But China, I think it timed this situation very well, and the game which China is playing, I think you want to commend it, because it is like almost it timed and said, I have to negotiate this deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia so that they can start talking again, and then we will pull all of them as major producers, as major countries, as energy producers, major energy producers with some of the biggest energy reserves in the world, and then we will pull all of them and put them in BRICS. So I think that was a chess move which China really did. It was an absolute chess move which the West did not see coming. And I wish they knew that this was coming. But I think that China has played them a really huge chess move. And this is not for China, actually, but it is for the whole global South. Because like it or not, somebody has to lead the process. Somebody has to be in the leadership process. And I think that China has played that leadership role very well. And of course, India also is playing its, role very well. India is very big on defending Africa. We have seen this consistently. India has been calling for the admission of Africa into the G20. I think this is the way we need to be working together as the G20 going forward. So we all at the Global South, I think, should have a stake in this. I should be interested in the changing world order that we are experiencing, and we should be interested in protecting BRICS and talking good about BRICS and inviting it in our countries. And then, of course, understanding what is going on in BRICS itself and how it operates.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kwame, because I thought that many people like me have these thoughts. Most of them, they are playing, how do you call it, eating with two forks. So is that possible? And sometimes that eating with two forks is at the expense of the other member or, another country from their own continent. So that needs to be sorted out. Now, let's focus on Africa. From Africa, it's not only Ethiopia and Egypt that have applied to be a member. I think we have Nigeria, we have Zimbabwe, we have Morocco from North Africa as well.
But I think Algeria too. Algeria too. I was not sure about Algeria. I think they were saying that Algeria too applied.
Yeah, I think expressed interest or something. I read that for sure. Why these two? And very interesting, historically, can we say, I am allowed to say I come from Ethiopia. I'm an African born in Ethiopia. That's how I describe myself, but still I'm attached to Ethiopia. Historically, these two countries have been united and divided by the River Nile. And we have had our rifts still not sorted out. Do you think it's purposely that they do you think both we have discussed, you remember, with Lambert, we even compared, because it was publicly Ethiopia and Egypt applied, and Morocco also we heard at different times, and Nigeria later, but we were saying which one qualify more. We were discussing this. So now, number one, why these two as opposed to other African countries? The other one is it deliberate that since these two have rifts that they cannot leave one out, or ultimately it will make them? Somebody was asking here a question, will China now make a peace between Egypt and Ethiopia as well? And the other one was commenting also, now that they are both in BRICS, they will quickly sort it out. So yeah, the two questions: why these two countries? Why not Morocco? Why not Nigeria? Nigeria, look at its GDP, look at huge.
Yeah, Nigeria is the biggest economy. Nigeria is the biggest economy.
And then what will it do if you think it will have any impact by bringing these two countries now to work in BRICS? I mean, to be a member. In terms of their rifts that they have had for the past 3 years because of the Grand Renaissance and dam we are building on the Nile River. Yeah.
Yeah, I think absolutely this issue, I think, has to do a lot also to do with history, because as you know, history, these two countries and this region is a representative of the achievement of the Black people or Africa, you know, when it comes to civilization, the origin of civilization. And if you look at it, as you mentioned, the contest between Egypt and Ethiopia, it could have played a little bit of part, because these two places are great civilizations and great countries, and so that greatness is bound to come out, you know, in some sort of contest. But you don't want to also underplay the role of South Africa in determining which African countries joined the BRICS, because South Africa was very instrumental in determining who was going to join there, because it had a very strong voice, and it has been mobilizing actually the whole African continent for this particular summit. And if you look at it, a lot of African countries were present. At least they were represented by their regional, chairmen or presidents. For example, Ethiopia was present. Of course, it was admitted. We saw President Isaias was present, you know, from Eritrea. We saw the chairperson of the African Union was present, the president of Comoros, President Azari Assoumani. We saw the president of Burundi, who is the chairperson of the East African Community, was present. We saw President Chakwera from Malawi. Of course, this is the South Africa Development Corporation or Community, SADC. We saw Malawi was there. We saw Zambia was there. You know, currently the president of Zambia is the chairperson of SADC. We saw Djibouti was present, you know, to the occasion, and the president of the chairperson or representative of the Maghreb, the Arab Maghreb, also was present, and this shows you the Sahrawi Republic also was present, you know, so you can see that South Africa did a very good job of mobilizing the continent. And actually, President Cyril Ramaphosa mentioned this, that we invited most of the African countries to this. So it was, if you look at it, it was almost like a UN, some sort of General Assembly, because majority of the bodies around the world were present. Of course, even the Secretary General of the United Nations was around. So majority of them were around. Countries from, you know, South Latin America, from Asia, all of them, they were around. So you don't want to underestimate the role played by South Africa. And as you remember also, that South Africa played a major role in settling the conflict which was happening, where the rebels were disturbing in northern Ethiopia. So yeah, you can be sure that South Africa was determinant in who is going to enter, which African countries are going to enter in this particular community of BRICS partners. Why? Because South Africa could be wanting to have an interest in settling the issue of the GAD. Yes, of the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam. South Africa, I think, because it has been representing Africa, it has been speaking majorly on behalf of Africa. Even when you listen to President Cyril Ramaphosa, one word about South Africa, he would speak 2 words about Africa. At this particular summit, how it happened, he was majorly speaking about the African continent. So South Africa, I think, it sees itself in that leadership role. Even in the speech which President Cyril Ramaphosa gave to South Africa before the BRICS happened, he said that our foreign policy is hinged on African interests. It moves with Africa. Our foreign policy in South Africa, it is designed in such a way that it represents the interests. It rotates around the interests of the African continent. So it is possible that South Africa has an interest in settling the issue of the Ethiopia, the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam, which Egypt has been having, with Ethiopia, that Egypt has been dissatisfied about the situation. And of course, what supports this, you have heard numerous times also, President Cyril Ramaphosa, even at the Paris, a new global finance pact in Paris, President Cyril Ramaphosa and also the president of Congo Brazzaville, President Sassou Nguesso, they were talking about the Inga Dam of Democratic Republic of Congo, that we need to construct that dam so that South Africa also can get energy from there. So you can see that South Africa has that leadership role. And actually also the United States has noticed that. That is why before the happening of the United States Africa Summit, US Africa Summit that happened in 2020 last year, I think it was in December, the beginning of December, South Africa was called, they called Ramaphosa to Washington for a state visit to Washington before that summit happened. So there's a recognition also South Africa in itself that we have this leadership role and we have to play it very well, extremely, very well. Of course, this is not to diminish the fact that Ethiopia took its initiative to apply, and also the fact that Egypt took the initiative to apply, but I think that they picked out the most suitable candidates in this, and South Africa had a hand because it had certain interests attached to these particular candidates. And of course, you can speak of Ethiopia is an old civilization, and you can speak of the fact that Ethiopia has the second biggest population on the continent, and BRICS wants to be part of that. That is very important. Also, it is possible that these are points which were presented and they were accepted. You can talk of the fact that Ethiopia is somewhat independent. It is become very independent from the West. Unlike countries like, Nigeria. This is not to speak bad, or this is not to speak lowly of the Nigerian people, but I'm talking about the Nigerian government. The Nigerian government has, of the past, shown that it doesn't want to be independent. It wants to be attached to the West. So I think BRICS, on one side, it was looking at countries which have somewhat an independent foreign policy. They are trying to determine their own destiny in one way or the other. So these are the countries which qualify. And I think that, President Sisi of Egypt also has come out somewhat as someone who has an independent way of thinking, of looking at things, and that is why they have been having these conversations with South Africa. President Sisi and President Ramaphosa have really been having conversations, and they are very close. If you look at the new global finance pact, which happened in Paris, President Cyril Ramaphosa was referring to President Sisi a lot, that we have been speaking with President Sisi about the Cairo, the South Africa to Egypt, or the Cairo to Johannesburg railway line. We have been talking about it with President Sisi. So you can see that presence, that friendship between South Africa and Egypt, there. So that brings that interest issue of South Africa in there. Now, also on one side, also you have China also has interest in this. If you remember very well, China has a lot of interest in Ethiopia, with the building of the Djibouti-Ethiopia railway line. So it has a lot of interest in Ethiopia. It has built a lot of factories there, a lot of industrial parks, and also in Egypt, and the fact that Egypt, of course, you have the Suez Canal around there, and all the trade which goes to Europe from Asia passes through the Suez Canal. So you have those interests there. So this is a place where China is very much interested. And I think that is why also they invited the president of Djibouti so that he could be around, because he's also around that canal, that Suez Canal there, that he had to be present. And I think that there's consideration of him having that communication also with Egypt, so that the communication can always be flowing through Egypt, through Djibouti, so that there can be that clarity of thought around this area, so that trade will not be disturbed. If you are pushing oil, if you are transporting oil, for example, you are shipping oil from Saudi Arabia, Iran, if you are China and you are taking that oil, or India, you want that area to be friendly. You want these countries around here to be friendly. So that you cannot rule it out also. And the fact that China has come out as the creator of a new world order, so China could have an interest in settling, also handling that sort of disagreement between Egypt and Ethiopia, as we have seen in the same way you spoke about, they handled the Iran and Saudi Arabia issue. So China also could be interested in that part. And in the whole, when you put this together, BRICS could find or could provide a platform for where to solve these issues, a bigger platform apart from the African Union, apart from the United Nations, which of course Ethiopia rejected, that we don't want our issue to be discussed by the United Nations. We want it to be at the African Union. So these BRICS, these countries, their presence in BRICS could provide in the whole a bigger platform actually for settling that issue of the GAD dam. So when the African Union comes together with BRICS, I believe that this issue should be able to be settled easily, and everyone should be able to come out satisfied with the outcome. So this is when it comes to that issue of Africa, the relations and the dynamics, how they played in the selection of candidates. I believe it could be something of the sort.
Yeah, now that you say it, I start to think also Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, there is some kind of competition. So it's really, and I was thinking immediately, these words were running in the back of my head. Okay, BRICS can be a peacemaker by bringing us countries.
So China is really shaping a new world, but it is doing it almost in its stealth mode. It's doing it in sort of secrecy, in a stealthy mode, almost in an invisible way, but it is shaping a new world order, somewhat which is more stable than what we have been having, whereby the West just wants to come to a place and destroy everyone. Anyone who doesn't agree with the West, that person has to be demonized as undemocratic, as the one violating human rights, and then that person has to be destroyed. The whole country has to be destroyed. People have to be killed because you don't agree with the West. So that has been the order. So China is somewhat coming up with the new world order, but is doing this stealthily. And of course, if you are doing, if you are creating something new or an organization, and if you are a leader, definitely you want people to feel comfortable if they are agreeing to something. You want people to feel comfortable, even if you are a leader in an organization. Definitely you want parts which are warring against each other, even if they are your subordinates, or in some way in an organization, you want these two people to feel comfortable to talk to each other and agree that what is at stake. We all have an interest, and we should be able to work together. And I think that this is the role that China is bringing on the table, and is trying to present a new way of solving conflicts and issues which we have against each other. And so United Arab Emirates, Iran, Saudi Arabia, you have Egypt, you have Ethiopia. So now he is providing a platform of stabilizing, because these three countries now, when you go to the Middle East, they are actually very influential in the Middle East. If you have them on board, it is possible you could stabilize the Middle East. You could stabilize the Middle East. And if you have Ethiopia and Egypt, around here, it is also very, because majority of the East African and Horn of Africa region is relatively stable, not exactly stable, but it is relatively stable compared to the western part of the continent. And so if you have this area stable now, you don't create another chaos between Ethiopia and Egypt. Now you could use that leverage of the East African community, which is relatively stable, and push with momentum, push all that force to the western part of the continent. I think you should be able to stabilize all the continent.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kwame, for that. Yeah, it's a new, as we discussed, new things, new developments, new thinking, and it just makes me excited to go and dig in it. Yeah. Now, speaking of peacemaking, we have these two founding members who have their rift is going on, India and China. You all are not new for that. We have followed it, we have analyzed it to the point that we were thinking actually this adding of members might not happen in this summit. South Africa took us by surprise. We will hear a background information, really what kind of arguments and discussion went behind the scene. But in any case, well done for all of them. Well done for South Africa representing us. Okay, I did not forget my point. Now, in terms of peacemaking, China versus India, what do you think, what kind of role Africa can play in smoothing the relationship between these two so that BRICS can be functional and useful, because we all are really hoping as if something gonna come out of it, but there is a hard work to be done individually and as a group. So what kind of role Africa can play really by going into the root of it, the root cause of it?
Yeah, if you look at South Africa, it has emerged on the continent.
Allow me, Kwame, before you start. It's good. We have a lot of questions and suggestions, comments here that will that they're asking your view mostly, or it could be our view. But just put that in the back of your mind. We will do. We will.
Come to them. Yes, we'll come to them.
Yeah. So just it's gonna go longer for you to prepare you. It's more than it's different today, and I love it. I really hopefully will address it. Now go on, please. Thank you. Back to you.
Yeah. So if you look at South Africa, it has emerged, as some sort of foreign policy titan on the continent, or maybe you could use another word and call it some sort of foreign policy juggernaut on the African continent. If you look at how it has operated, it has been able to resist the pressure from the United States. Of course, it has obligations to the International Criminal Court, but it has been able to navigate all these challenges and host this BRICS summit, which the United States has tried and used all directions to defeat. So that puts South Africa in a very special position, not only on the African continent, but even on the global stage. And it is likely that if President Cyril Ramaphosa continues in this direction and probably gets another term in office, I don't know whether he qualifies for another term in office, but even his successor, if his successor builds on that kind of momentum, I think South Africa is likely to be a sought after country when it comes to foreign policy. And I don't know whether this has to do with only President Cyril Ramaphosa and Madame Naledi Pandor, that they are a very good combination. when it comes to foreign policy, that they do understand how international relations works or what it is about. I'm not sure whether that is the case. I don't know whether it is an issue which has to do with the ANC itself as a country, but that's another issue. Of course, we have seen South Africa also play a major role in Ukraine. When you remember the team which went, the African Union team which went to Ukraine, South Africa was the leader. President Cyril Ramaphosa is the one who was leading this delegation in negotiating, and you could see that he was speaking. He's the one who was speaking most of the times. So South Africa, as a member of BRICS, as a founding member of BRICS, of course, was invited by the other members when they were still four. I think it could play a major role because of this record which has been built up over this period of time. I think South Africa could play a major role in helping to stabilize the relationship between India and China. And India and China consistently, as we have said, if they talk to each other, they will be able to find a solution to their differences and be able to live amicably along each other, in BRICS and even on the international stage outside of the BRICS. And this will be able to help to avoid, will help them to avoid the manipulation of this relationship by the Western imperialists and the colonialists, who have very much an interest in keeping these two divided so that they are not talking to each other, and then they can continue to manipulate. And that is how the United States, of course, will keep itself. Will have a foot in Asia to be able to dominate Asia and use everyone in Asia if it has always India on its side. But if China and India are all on one side, 100%, the two titans of Asia, then that means the United States has been kicked out of Asia. It will not have any future in Asia. So that is the threat. And I think that Africa and South Africa in particular could play a major role. Nigeria could have played a role, but because it is not part, as we have mentioned in the past, I think there's a program where we say that Nigeria is not playing the role it is supposed to play on the global stage, and especially on the African continent. Nigeria is supposed to be protecting the interests of the African continent as the biggest economy on the African continent. It is supposed to be protecting, it should be playing a major role. Nigeria has some of the smartest people on this African continent and in the world. But the leaders, they have some of the worst leaders. And of course, it is because of the political system which we are running as the African continent. And Nigeria, of course, has a lot of focus from the West that they want to keep it in domination. So you find that Nigeria is not playing the role it is supposed to play, even though it has some of the smartest people on the African continent who are more qualified to lead that country. But you find that some of the most unqualified, they are the ones who are leading the country, and the smartest are just running out of the country because they cannot endure, this level of disorganization. So Nigeria could have played a big role, but of course that now has been left for South Africa to play. And of course, we are seeing Ethiopia also come, and it would have been also very important for it, for Kenya to be there. But we saw that even President Ruto was not present, and of course, questions have started rising on President Ruto about his leanings, whether he's trying to work with imperialists against African interests, even though he came as a Pan-Africanist. Question marks have started rising. He was not also present at this BRICS summit. I didn't see him. I don't know whether he sent his, deputy president. I'm not very sure, or the Minister of Foreign Affairs is the one who was present. I didn't follow up on that very well, but it's likely maybe that's what happened. But I think that he was supposed to be present. He should have been, at least President Ruto should have been present at the BRICS summit. But Kenya also on the African continent is one country which is known to have a very assertive foreign policy, a very serious, is a very serious country when it comes to foreign policy. So should have played that role, but is not present, and is even, I think it did not apply to join BRICS, which I'm not very clear about that, but I think we can find that out later. But that is the order. I think South Africa will continue to hold that as Ethiopia also builds up that capacity, because I think in the past Ethiopia has also been really working very hard to build up its foreign policy, to punch it up and strengthen it.
Thank you. Thank you, Kwame. I have two things. I'm going to bring you back to where you analyzed why Ethiopia and Egypt from Africa. So now we have three countries from Africa. The first, South Africa, is being a founding member, and then now Ethiopia and Egypt. Now, how these three countries representing Africa can advance the agenda of Africa? For example, a very simple example, the African Continental Free Trade Area getting a fund to facilitate the trade, aside all the bureaucracies which needs to be facilitated by the African Union, but in terms of funding, getting a fund from the Bank of BRICS, what kind of role they can play in terms of bringing that Pan-Africanism, which the African Continental Free Trade Area is under it.
Yeah, so I think that this role of leadership of the African group at the BRICS, I think, will still fall on South Africa, because he will be seen as the big brother, and he will be responsible for, of course, bringing all the other countries to speed about how the organization runs and what happens there. And of course, South Africa should be able to use this leverage as a founding member, as a big brother, to mobilize the group of the three who are representing Africa BRICS to speak, or for them to be able to use this momentum from BRICS to come out to the African Union. As we know, South Africa has a lot of influence on the African Union. If you remember, when it came to the issue of ejecting Israel, that South Africa was very instrumental, that Israel also pointed to South Africa as the culprit who pushed it out. And of course, Algeria also, because they didn't want Israel there, since it has apartheid approach to the people of Palestine. So I think that they will be very instrumental. And also the Africa Continental Free Trade Area actually featured a lot at this summit. It was spoken about a lot by South Africa in the issue, on the first day, especially at the BRICS Business Forum, of inviting investors to come and invest in Africa, but with the emphasis which was put up that we want people who are going to invest in Africa and refine the resources from here. We are tired of people who are taking out resources and they are just taking raw material resources instead of refining and processing the products from here. We want people who are going to come here. So that featured a lot. So I think that the two of them, they have to open themselves to the level of Pan-Africanism if they want to be successful in representing the interests of Africa. And they have to use that momentum to be able to mobilize the rest of the African continent in that direction. And of course, that includes Nigeria, where there is some sort of confused leaders in Nigeria. And in West Africa, there's some sort of confusion right now. And I think that it would be important for these countries working together. Of course, Egypt has not had a lot of penetration in West Africa, but I think that Ethiopia and South Africa working together could bring the fold of Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, and be able to bring them together and push them in this direction. And since South Africa has a lot of influence, and of course Ethiopia is the one who's hosting the African Union headquarters, should be able to have an influence on the direction of the African Union, and of course the various African heads of state. Ethiopia has a lot of leverage in the region, as you have seen that it was able to mobilize the region during the conflict. So they should be able to mobilize the particular areas where they have strength to be able to rein in on the direction of the African Union. And then, of course, the African Union also should be able to put pressure, for example, on ECOWAS, where we have a lot of some of the leaders, of course, not all of them, but some of the leaders who are kind of misguided. They are going in a direction where they don't understand that they want to fight against their own brother and cause bloodbath on behalf of France, the colonialists. And of course, they know these things very well, but just to please the colonialists, they want to do this. So I think that South Africa has to play a major role, even in going all the way, South Africa and Ethiopia, and of course with Egypt. They have to play a major role in moving in this direction. And of course, I would have loved the African group to have Algeria on top, because Algeria is also very assertive. As we speak right now, the Algerian foreign minister is in West Africa, actually visiting Nigeria, Ghana, and Benin to try to talk to them about the issue of Niger, of invading Niger. So I would have loved actually to have Algeria in that group of the African countries which are representing the African Union or the African people at the BRICS, because Algeria also has somewhat a very strong independent foreign policy in that regard. So this, I think, that is where we need to go as Africans, and this is the way in which these countries can play an important role, can play a very instrumental role in directing the direction of the African continent, and then be able to mobilize it so that we can have defined objectives. And of course, we, the civil society, African civil society, we have not spoken about it. I think this is the time also for us to reach out, for example, to South Africa and also give direction. I mean, our work is not merely to sit down and say, we accept everything you guys are saying, because some of the things you can see them better if you are not in the pitch playing. You can see, you have seen when it comes to football, the majority of the people who are outside in the pitch are not playing. They are always seeing us, oh, you should have kicked it here, I should have kicked it there. So I think we, as people who are not the active players in African civil society, I think it is also time for us now to engage these countries, because now they already have leverage. They can go out there and play on the international stage, but we also have access to them as African civil society. So we have these ideas where we want the continent to go. Then this is a chance for us also to use that and write to them and try to engage them, find a way of engaging them. Of course, I'm not saying that it is easy, but we could use that. We could use that opportunity, because we know that if you reach out to the Ethiopian government and the South African government, then you have the whole African BRICS group, and you are likely to have your ideas represented or presented at the BRICS level, at the international level, as African civil society. So I think these are the advantages which are likely to come through this kind of arrangement by the African group at BRICS.
Thank you, Kwame. Indeed, I agree 100% with you. I just hope that the country that I come from, Ethiopia, will do its best and solve our internal problems and fit our name in the continent where it comes from, the leadership that it takes. I mean, I just cannot be quiet and be excited for it. I hope we'll be able to resolve our internal problems and live to the name that we have kept historically. That being said, in this summit, I mean, normally in big forums like this, small gestures also needs to be paid attention. Just like, for example, when the African leaders who were going to facilitate, like the peace mission, went to talk to Zelensky in Ukraine, and then President Putin in Russia, all the abuse that they have. The abuse from the Poland security was it, and then the way they sit in palace with President Putin and with Zelensky, it all said a lot without even talking. Now, in this summit, what we have noticed is, as we know, the missing founding member leader, President Putin, did not participate, but he did virtually. And in that big business forum, when he was about to speak, We saw how he was cheered by a crowd of Africans, businessmen and women. Now, this says a lot, regardless of all the propaganda by the West to demonize leaders who do not bow for them. Regardless of that, we have been fed again and again, but still the reality is different. So tell us your view on that.
Yeah, I think that there's a level to which people's consciousness raises, and when that consciousness raises, there's no turning back. So I think that this is the level to which people across the globe have reached, and now when that level of consciousness is reached, then people start questioning everything that is put out to them. We are seeing that we are living in the information age, or the so-called data age, whereby you have mass information. So people now can find alternative information, unlike in the 60s, where the only sources of information was BBC and a few other networks around the world. That is the only places where there was no internet. So, but now you have access to information from all across the world. And of course, the West started by blocking off Russia's networks from broadcasting in Africa. But what we are seeing is that people still know where to get the information of what is happening in Russia. And people have read the history. You have to remember that the literacy rate has increased tremendously. And if the literacy rate increase, that means people's consciousness increase. People are reading the history. They know the genesis of the conflict between Russia and the United States. And Russia too has done a tremendous job of coming out to present its case before the world and say, this is what happened. We have been talking to these people and they have been violating it. They have not been listening to us. And we have been talking to them for 10 years, but they have been doing the same thing. America is 10,000 miles away, 10,000 kilometers, miles away from Ukraine. But how can it come from there? It's starting to establish a military base at the door of Ukraine. So people have read the history. Now, when it came to demonizing President Putin, people now, they are not buying it. People, they cannot buy it anymore. So that is why you have instances like this that happened at this summit, that when President Putin it was his time to speak during the BRICS business forum, people started cheering because they know who is coming to speak. So when President Putin's name was mentioned by President Cyril Ramaphosa, people started cheering. And this is a representation that people are being choked. So it shows that people want to speak against the West, but there's no one to speak for them. There's no one to say, you people are oppressing us. You are destroying us. You are destroying all the countries across the world. But at the same time, you're talking about human rights. You are killing people. You are killing millions of people. But at the same time, you're talking about human rights. So when there's someone to challenge that kind of person who has become a bully and has normalized it and is lying to everyone that this is the way to go, my bullying is the way to go, and what I tell you, if I tell you that is human rights, what I'm doing is human rights, you have to accept it. And everyone keeps quiet because people don't have the strength to fight against the United States. So when you see that people are cheering President Putin, then they are recognizing that at least someone has come out to fight against this bully. At least someone has come up to challenge this bully who has been, this is what we wanted to do. If we had strength, the same strength and determination like President Putin. So I think that is the recognition. And it's the same thing actually which we are seeing even in Niger, is that the people have been suffering and they are being suffocated, and France is exploiting and exploiting, but they are telling us that this is democracy, that is democracy. You should accept it. That's democracy. Accept the democracy. We have given you the democracy. Just keep quiet. You have gone to vote. That is the democracy. Now we will take the resources. So, and the people are keeping quiet and they are saying, what can we do? They are powerful. France is powerful. The United States is powerful. And they have also brought troops in our country. So what can we do? And also our military, African military, have been bought out, is in their hands. So what can we do? We can't do anything. So there has been that kind of apathy within the African population or the African civil society. So to the extent that anyone who comes up to challenge that system, which they already feel that is an unjust system and is being propped up with propaganda, they feel that that person is a hero. And so that is the same thing that we are seeing. They feel that this person is speaking for us. The person is just doing exactly what we wanted to do. So this is the same thing you are seeing in Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, that people came out to support. Because they feel oppressed. People are being oppressed, but they can't talk. The United States and the West is oppressing the people. People don't want to have the World Bank in their countries. People don't want to have the IMF in their countries. But they are being forced that you should have it. People do not want to have people telling them about democracy and human rights before they have eaten food. But someone says we should accept it. So when somebody comes up to challenge that system, oh, that person is seen as a hero. But on the side, when there's no one, then people keep quiet and they just say, what can we do? We just accept the system the way it is. What can we do? But the moment there's someone to challenge, then of course they are very willing, to clap and say, at least somebody is there to challenge this kind of oppressive system that they are lying to us. We know that they are lying. So that is a recognition of that the Western system is not meant to be here. And these people are not practicing what they have been saying. And so there's that consciousness, the rise in awareness of what is going on. People are now more aware of their surroundings. They are more understanding of history. People are aware of the history. They know it. They know that the West was not built on democracy. It was built on oppression, colonialism, killing others. Up to today, go in Iraq, kill people, take their oil, go to Syria. Right now, the United States is in Syria, has occupied Syria, but is telling Russia is saying that Russia is occupying Ukraine. But the United States is in Syria, is occupying and stealing Syria's oil. But they think that these things, people don't know them, that these things are hidden. Yet people know these things, but they're just keeping quiet. People are just there keeping quiet, but they know these things, that these people are brutal. These guys are dictators. They are not democratic people. Of course, this can be also seen at the United Nations, where we have seen African leaders, Indian leaders crying day and night every year, going to the United Nations, reform the United Nations, make the United Nations a democratic institution. Nothing is done. Make the IMF and World Bank democratic institutions. That has not been done. And so if an institution like BRICS comes up and people like Putin come up and the coups which are happening in West Africa come up, of course, people are meant to clap. And that's why you are seeing even in the coups in West Africa, many people are supporting, even people outside of Niger, or majority of the Africans, saying that we are tired. We are really tired of this thing. You can't force it on us and be telling us that democracy, when you are stealing our resources. Let us settle the issue of our resources. Let us have our resources. Then we can talk about democracy later. So I think there's that issue of the consciousness, the rise in consciousness and literacy rate is a very important factor. And of course, Russia's determination to inform the world about what is going on, I think has played a major role. We have seen the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Lavrov, going all across the continent. Numerous times he has been making rounds in Latin America, in Africa. Numerous times he has been to Africa. So I think all these things are playing a major factor in what is happening.
Yeah. Thank you, Kwame. The other thing that we missed from this BRICS is that which was highly anticipated, the de-dollarization issue. Do you think India got a win-win? Okay, we will admit members, but this one we will never, we are not going to touch it. Yeah, no development, nothing. But those were the two issues expected from here, from this summit: new members and then de-dollarization,
Yeah, I think the issue, the issue of de-dollarization, I think, is still center stage, and the president of the new development bank, President Dalima, is very much at work. Joseph Dalima is very much at work, and they mentioned it that BRICS
who is
is going to
the
issue.
president of who? Which bank, you said?
She's called Joseph Dalima. She was a former president of Brazil, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, so as she mentioned that they are going to issue loans in local currency. So that means this is going to upset, of course, the dollar. But of course, India is also been pushing its own independent foreign policy aggressively when it comes to its region, of course, even in Africa, especially in countries where it exports a lot, like we spoke about Kenya, we spoke about Tanzania, they signed a deal already. We spoke about Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia imports some stuff from India, and India buys energy from Saudi Arabia. So they have an arrangement in which they are negotiating to pay in rupees. And a couple of countries which are neighboring India and are trading with India directly. I think Sri Lanka should be one of those. So India is also moving in that direction. So I could say that the issue of the dollarization, I think it will be slow, but it will be effective and it will be a win-win situation for both. India will be moving in the other direction, working on its independent policy. But this independent policy also is not going to affect very much. It is not going to affect very much what BRICS is doing, because BRICS is not saying that they should use the BRICS currency all out. But what they have been mentioning is that they want to use this currency for only transactions between nations. Transactions between nations. Instead of benchmarking their currencies on the dollar, they will be able to benchmark those currencies on the BRICS currency. And then the lending BRICS bank, the new development bank, will be lending, but it will be lending in the local currencies. It will not lend anyone in dollars. So this is a major upset for the issue of the dollarization. And that is why it is causing a lot of fear in the United States. So it is no accident why the United States was fighting very much to upset, to make sure that this meeting doesn't happen in South Africa.
Thank you, Kwame. Now, our last question for today, I think I might have passed some things because we have a great list of questions. But yeah, this will be the last for us before we go to through the chat section. What can we take as a lesson, or BRICS itself, from its approaching, and creation of a group? What are the lessons for BRICS?
Yeah, I think the lessons majorly for the global citizens, I think, who have been looking for an alternative to the Western system, which is very arrogant. Of course, we have seen them pushing their culture, disrespecting. If you look at the United States, it's a country which has been around for, less than, since its creation, a couple of years, I think less than 200 years. But you have civilizations which have been around. You look at Ethiopia, more than 3,000 years, China, the same, India. They have all the civilizations with strong cultures that have been built up over millennia. And here is a country with just a couple of years, a couple of hundreds of years comes around and tries to dictate to these countries and civilizations which have been around for a long time. Russia, more than 1,000 years of history. So a country which does not have even up to 300 years of history since its independence, tries to dictate to other people what they should do and tell them to do that. So I think that it is a moment for people to be proud, the people of the global world to be proud, and especially the global South, because that is where majority of that history has been made, you know, of 3,000 years and 4,000 years and more than 6,000 years if you look at the Kemetic civilization which happened in Africa, of course. So I think it's time to understand that institutions can be created, and you don't have to have one person loading it over to you. And you can have these challenges of one country trying to dominate the world, but you still can look within yourself and you can still work together to come to conclusive solutions, you know, to get out of this mess. We have seen the United States pushing itself arrogantly and dominating everywhere, you know, taking over countries and bombing. Of course, we have mentioned this, and the cultural hegemony itself has been, you know, happening and telling everyone what to do. But these people are not smarter than anyone, you know. So I think it is time to understand that different cultures are existent, you know, with their distinct characteristics, but also we can come together and work together as a people, you know, to fight off certain challenges. We've spoken about climate change, which is affecting everyone. We should be able to fight off, you know, the issue of climate change together, but not at the expense of another. That because you don't want Africa to develop, now you want to use the excuse of climate change to tell Africa that Africa should not use its gas, it should not drill and use its oil. You want to use the issue, the excuse of climate change. But if we can work together, we have a partnership like this as BRICS, where we can respect each other. You know, you can create a relationship where we respect each other and we are there for each other. And this brings us actually to some of the things which were mentioned. Prime Minister Modi mentioned that we could set up in BRICS a system where we have research in railway for BRICS countries. And I was like, wow, this is something which Africa could tap in, because we are trying to build our own railway network across the African continent. In the case of, you know, in the case of Africa Continental Free Trade Area, you know, we mentioned the railway system which I designed, which is called the Africa Railway, you know, Triangle Network Master Plan, which I already have. And he talked about also the space. We could work on space. We should have a space program as BRICS. So I think when you have a relationship where you are respecting each other as countries working together, and you don't have an organization like the UN, where, you know, a group of countries, they have given themselves rights to abuse everyone and use the UN however they want and be naming things however they want them, give human rights to whom they want. This one is the one who's respecting human rights to term them. And these people are not special people that they have special intelligence, but they have given themselves these rights and call themselves that American exceptionalism. They are exceptional people. So this kind of thinking is not different actually from what Hitler was saying, because Hitler was claiming that Germans are special people. You see, this is what he was claiming. So this is no difference from Nazism, what the United States is doing, with claiming that the United States is special. So United States are exceptional people, except United States exceptionalism. So it's the same thinking like Nazism, but we could have a relationship where countries, you know, respect each other. You know, we talk to each other as nations. And I think that this is what the relationship with BRICS represents. And BRICS is being looked at, you know, of course, some people laughingly, jokingly, but it represents a real moral challenge when it comes to the United Nations. And actually also President Dilma Silva of Brazil, president of Brazil, mentioned it and said that the emergence of BRICS is a challenge to the United Nations, it represents and it is significant of the failure of the United Nations. The war in Ukraine shows the failure of the United Nations. He mentioned it point blank, that it mentions and shows the failure of the United Nations, that it treats certain people certain way and others another way, and it allows itself to be used. And so then it has to go down the dustbin of history, and it has to be replaced by organizations like BRICS. And I see BRICS even evolving further in taking up more roles than than what the United Nations, or the roles which the United Nations was taking. Of course, people will continue to participate in the United Nations General Assembly, but people will start taking it less serious if they see that BRICS is moving rapidly in the direction of solving global issues and stabilizing the world. As you have seen, China participated in stabilizing, Middle East between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So it is likely that a major role, could be played by this organization, and this is, I think, a great lesson to all the people, across the globe, especially the global South.
Indeed, well points. You pointed out very good what lessons that BRICS has to take. Now, on that note, we are through, but we might come back, and come back means another day, and do still about BRICS. As you know, as we have said, they have not said anything on de-dollarization. And I'm reading here is a comment from CNDS. If decision is not taken, that means maybe it's work on progress. So there might be still something to come out, definitely. Point taken. So yeah, thank you very much for tuning in, for being here. I've seen a very consistent number so far. The engagement is high. The family is getting bigger, but we want to be even bigger than this. So as we do this, please go and share to your network once again. You might have done it in the beginning. Now we will go through the comments. Thank you very much, Kwame, really, for that 1 hour and 37 for both
Thank
of
you,
us.
Mahlet.
Yeah.
And thank you, everyone who's watching. We are really glad that you are part of this family. Count yourself as part of the family of Connect Africa. And we've mentioned we are not only presenters, people who are talking about things we are not doing, but we are engaged in the real work. And we invite you to join us through your support and support of the channel itself. Work together in pushing forward the African narrative and the ideas which are Pan-African in nature, so that we can stop being bullied by the rest of the world, because we are people who are equal to anyone across the world. So no one should be telling us what to do in any way across the world.
All right. So we are not finished. Some of you are saying thank you, and some of you are saying bye. No, we're gonna go through your comments. So I told Kwame, I made him to promise to stay longer. It's already 1 hour and 37 minutes, but we still have to go through your comments and questions. It's important for us. We also learn from you, by the way. Now, from bottom to up, I'm gonna do it. So I hope you don't mind. Yeah, Osie, Sinovia, Black, Aaron, Ciendes, Mikey, Simba, Charles, Giedu, just to do some shout outs. Esther, Showa, W, Maya, thank you. Yeah, it's the family is getting bigger. Now, from bottom to up, what is the question? Oh, okay, Sinovia, I will post it here for those of you. Okay, I'm gonna post here our PayPal accounts, and yeah, please use that for any funding or support that you would like to do to Connect Africa. Synovia is, by the way, I have to give a shout out, our supporter. Thank you very much for what you are doing. I saw a question here. BRICS, okay, Charles says BRICS is the UN and IMF World Bank put together. Okay. Yeah, if we look at the GDP, you are right. CNDS asked, what's your take on the next BRICS meeting next year being hosted by Russia rather than Brazil?
Yeah, I think that it will do very well. I think if BRICS itself, I'm sure Russia.
What do you mean saying this instead of, is it some, it was supposed to be in Brazil and now that taken by Russia or what? I am
Yeah,
not
I
sure.
think Russia suggested that it would want to host it. I think it would be a very good platform to which to mobilize the global south on behalf of Russia, because we are seeing that it is likely that this war could still be going on until next year, what is going on in Ukraine. So it would be a good platform to mobilize the global south to demonstrate that Russia is not isolated. And I am sure that Russia would want to achieve that, but also in a way of solidarity, the global south, I'm sure, would agree, and China, of course, would be at the forefront of trying to negotiate with Brazil to be able to organize it in Russia so that we can show the imperialists that Russia is not isolated, but rather the West is the one who is isolated in these regards, in what is going on, of course, in Ukraine. So I think that it would be a very good platform to show solidarity with Russia or the BRICS countries.
Unmuted. All right. Okay, that's covered. Uh, Also, Mikey Simba said also Brazil is too close to USA. Wow. Another one.
No, I think it has been in the past with the previous president, but this current president is really very anti. And if you remember, President Da Silva is a socialist. So President Lula da Silva is a socialist. So he's not really very close to capitalists and how they exploit the planet. If you look at his campaigns towards the stoppage of cutting down trees or cutting down the forests in the Amazon forests. So he is very much actually on the side of the global south. If you listen to his speeches, which he gave even at this particular summit, is very much for Africa, because he knows that Brazil has a very strong connection to Africa. A lot of people of African descent exist in Brazil. So he's very much on board with bonding, correctly with the global south and with all the other African countries and all the other global south countries. So I'm sure he would be on board if the other BRICS countries rained on him and spoke to him that we need to do this for Russia. I think he would accept.
Okay, but he may have also Mikey Simba meant from the point of geography. So for the security reason, better to have it in Russia than
Maybe, maybe.
so in both ways. And also the president also last part was closer. Both ways it can go. Okay, now did I miss a question? When you guys point new comments that I go down and then now I lose where I was. So bear with me. Okay, Aaron says it's normal to read negative information about the leadership by some sold out citizens in collaboration with the West and some neighboring countries with a lot of ambitions in the area. Yeah, there's a lot of hate because that has to do, by the way, how the Western media is, that propaganda is really dangerous, and how it is also it shows you have a greater, it has a greater influence. Most of, there are people who says even here in our chat section, oh, we never heard about Eritrea, and I go our videos and go through the comments, I see, wow, just now I know about Eritrea. So Eritrea itself, the government is very media shy in a way, not shy literally, but they don't make so much noise. That is one. And secondly, also, it is a propaganda that we have been fed as well. It's not easy to let that out.
Yeah, but I think that President Afaki has really come out aggressively this time.
Now, now it is
Yeah,
trust.
yeah.
Yeah.
If you look at, for example, the speech which he gave at BRICS, and then the previous speech, of course, which he gave during the during the Russia-Africa summit, that speech we gave you during the Russia-Africa summit, which really went viral. And this speech which he gave at the BRICS summit also, I'm sure it is likely that it will go viral. So I think he has really been coming out strong. So what I would like to see him doing, I would like to see him coordinating and talking to the other African countries which are in the same direction. He spoke about, of course, Niger, and how the exploitation of uranium has been in there in Niger. You know, he has been speaking about these things and said we need to recognize and realize that we are at war. You know, he's trying to bring that level of consciousness and point to the people how imperialism is using certain tools, the use of the United Nations to manipulate and then demonizing particular countries. So he spoke about the use of the International Monetary Fund and all these. So he was almost like speaking, and the way he sounded today, he was almost like reading from Nkrumah's book, Neo-Colonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism, if you look at his speech. Yeah, so he was just explaining the workings of neo-colonialism and how it is working, the propaganda which the United States is using, you know, the demonization, the use of NGOs. So he was almost like somebody who was reading from Nkrumah's book, Neo-Colonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism, and informing the people what is going on and how we need to recognize that we are at war, that these countries are bullying us. So we need to step up and start fighting back. So that was the spirit that he was sort of trying to present. So I would like him to push this strategy towards other countries like Algeria, you know, who are already, you know, on the same grid, on the same frequency, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, of course. I think I would like to see him make that connection so that the struggle can be intensified and the colonialists can be pushed out of the country. And of course, Zimbabwe, of course, which has also been under attack with sanctions. He spoke also about sanctions as a method which is being used with coercion, with sanctions. You know, he spoke about all these things. That speech actually spoke majorly about what Nkrumah was speaking about in the mechanism of neo-colonialism. So I
You
think I
have
would
been
like
big analysis here at Connect Africa also how you know you were comparing him that this somehow, you know, the way Eritrea under his leadership, he has made a visit to China, to Russia, and then like in 2 weeks difference, and then the Russia Africa summit came, and now BRICS. There's something that he has seen the time is right.
Yes, yes, yes. I think that maybe in the
Yeah.
past they may have been holding back because they saw that imperialism was very strong at that time. You know, so I think you recognize at certain level that we have some momentum, and then we have a certain group of people have come together to recognize that we need to fight back. And if those people are fighting back, then you also jump on board and say, let me also come out and join those who are fighting back instead of being in the back. But maybe in the past you were holding back and saying the enemy is too strong. You know, the person we want to fight against is too strong. He could use all means they have the propaganda, the lies which they spread before they attack the country, they could use that. And of course, the other countries, because they are not fighting back, like we mentioned, the consciousness of the people has not risen around the globe. So people will not be able to recognize, to realize that we are being attacked, but we are innocent people, like how you saw Gaddafi, Libya, that it was attacked, but propaganda was used. So, but when you see that the enemy is weakened a little bit and is engaged on different fronts, which he cannot win, then you also get strength and say, let's also join those people who are fighting back. So for me, that is how it looks like. That is why he has decided to come out. But I would like to see him a little bit more active, going out of Eritrea and visiting Zimbabwe, visiting Burkina Faso, visiting all these countries which are already engaged in the struggle against this colonialism by Europe and the West.
Yeah, definitely. We want those people to coordinate, or we facilitate the coordination, or something have to be done, like Algeria, South Africa himself, and then the one in West Africa. Okay, so CND says it means there are, okay, this is regarding where we said there is no decision made about the dollarization. So he said it means there are some details that were not concluded, so they couldn't come up with a directive. It's work in progress. Plus, Putin did not attend in person, so
no, it's not a particular idea, and it is not going to happen like that. That you have a currency and all these BRICS countries are going to use that currency. That is not how it is going to happen. Even today, it's not that you have the United States dollar is used everywhere in these particular countries. All the other countries have their currencies, apart from those countries where the United States has put a lot of sanctions, like Zimbabwe, to the point that it collapses. It leads to the collapse of the currency because of the inflation. That is where we see that there has been use of the dollar. But what is going to happen with, and actually what they have said is going to happen is the lending of currency, of giving loans in local currency. Of course, this is going to affect the United States dollar. How? Because the money which is in the IMF and World Bank majorly is put there by the United States. And it is dollars. And how does it get it? It prints it. So that means if it cannot print, because the BRICS has denied it, if you issue the BRICS currency in dollar, that means you are going to allow the United States to print and live off other people's lives. Because that is what has been happening, that the West has been living off other people's sweat. We work and they enjoy. Our people toil and they enjoy. They print and we work and we serve them with just printing. For them, they will be printing. So now when you do these loans in the local currencies, in the various currencies, in the various countries, then you are helping these countries. They don't have to look for the dollars. The United States will not print. That means the United States has to work to pay for the services which are produced outside. It cannot just go to print useless dollars. So that is the process of de-dollarization. That means BRICS is not going to need dollars. And the United States will not print those dollars, will not be allowed to print those dollars to give them to BRICS. So the local countries will benefit. And the BRICS partners will benefit. And of course, the BRICS Bank will benefit also. Of course, they are talking about establishing currency, which will be backed by gold, which will be used in exchange. And also, the exchange process, they are eliminating the dollar, like how you are seeing the Pan-African payment and settlement system. It eliminates the dollar, and countries are able to settle their trade in their various, which will, of course, this is a system which was started even before the dollarization was being spoken about. It was, this was an invention by the Africa Import and Export Bank, under the leadership of Professor Orama. I think he's from Nigeria. So that is how the BRICS also will be, that it will eliminate that process, that if there's trade, and of course the fear is that if you have almost, let's say 40% of global trade is being conducted outside the dollar by all these BRICS countries, then of course that is the process of de-dollarization. And that is what BRICS is working on. That is what it's going to do. And this is not just talk, this is going to happen. And India has already started doing this. It is really happening that India is trying to settle its trade in rupee, even with Saudi Arabia. You can go on the internet and look at it. Even Yahoo, which is a Western, neo-colonial media platform, was chastising India, that India is also sabotaging the dollar, So it is already happening as we are speaking right now. This process of de-dollarization is happening, that countries are really tired of what colonialism has been doing and destroying, and they have been living off the sweat of others. And that is what they are trying to put to stop. That the United States now, they have to work. They can't continue to live on the sweat of others while we work and they benefit and they drive Lamborghinis and what, while we are working for them and our people are poor. So that is what we are trying to put a stop to, or that is what BRICS is trying to put a stop to.
All right. Okay. So let's do this quickly. But no, thank you for reflecting on that, Kwame, because it's a very hot topic, this de-dollarization, and people expect to know how it works is important. Now, I just want to say something. I accidentally, I think, banned Atiendes. He's a great contributor here. I don't know what I did, but all his comments have been taken, and it tells me that I have banned him. That's really unfortunate, and I'm really sorry. So at Kaisorian Empire, you suggested there is not even dot next to his name because he's now removed from the chat section. So anyone tech savvy here, please, including yourself, Kwame, you can tell me how to do that. But in the meantime, since time is going, let me continue my job here to read the questions. I might have jumped something. Okay. This is Easter. Russia is showing the rest of the world that NATO is a paper tiger and that the wonder weapons of the West are for PR, not for real fighting or fighting a superior force. Okay, it's an opinion. Black says, yes, US control 1/3 of Syria, and unfortunately, those mainstreams of the West never ever mention this. Yeah, they are busy. They are busy talking about crisis in Niger. Aaron says, today the West confiscates the resources of developing countries explicitly. Mikey Simba says, United Nations was doomed from its inception. I agree with that, really. The brothers, Osie says, the brothers in Ethiopia, Eritrea, Algeria, and Zimbabwe are all lions in challenging the West. Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and Niger are waking up. By the way, a quick question here. I'm like one of the commentators here. I mean, the viewers here. Did the leaders of Burkina Faso or Mali attended this meeting? Kwame, for you. You are muted.
Yeah, what did you say? Mali?
Did Mali or Burkina Faso attended this meeting?
No, I did not see.
That was one of CND's question also. What BRICS is doing actually to encourage small economies, and where are those countries who are fighting that fight? Really, what BRICS is trying to fight now?
I think, of course, these countries, as we know, they have a lot of support from Russia. China has been a little bit quiet. Mostly China wants to lay low until the situation is clear, so then it will take side, or it normally wants its foreign policy. It wants to go with who is in power because of its interest in China. But I think at a certain extent, you will have to come out from that approach and also confront the colonialism in spaces where it is. But for now, we do not see the presence of these countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, at the BRICS summit.
That would have been a huge statement, the being banned by the AU and being invited. Oh my God, this would have been really good for South Africa as well. Yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, so what you have to remember also is that South Africa doesn't want to look like it is contradicting what ECOWAS is doing, because this would create some sort of a friction within, of course, the African Union itself, because South Africa has consistently been on the side of dialogue, of diplomacy, saying that this thing has to be solved by diplomacy, with diplomacy. But I have a little belief that it's possible that South Africa may be in communication with Algeria, as we mentioned that Algeria is already in the region. And the reason why Algeria came to Burkina Faso, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Algeria is in Benin, Ghana, and Nigeria, is visiting those areas. And we know the position of Algeria is that he doesn't want any war around this place. He wants the place stable and say that it will support Niger if they invade it. So it's possible that South Africa may be in communication with Algeria on advancing that position. So I think that South Africa would not want to look as if it is contradicting what ECOWAS is saying. As you know, the diplomacy is very delicate and is very complicated. It's not something that is a straight line. That is why countries sometimes have to to trade a tightrope, to the point whereby they will define their position. It is only in different cases that you see that a country believes that this is a situation where we have to take position and we will not be swayed, we will not be moved. Like you have seen South Africa come out in different issues when we come to the issue of Palestine and say we don't want Israel in this. So it takes a point, and this is due to the history of South Africa, that it had to deal with apartheid, and this is something which is easily understandable by everyone else, that people will be able to understand and say no, they are justified to take this position. And of course we have any other positions. We have seen positions like where Eritrea took a position and said we will not allow the issue of imperialism to demonize Russia and say we'll vote against imperialism's pushing at the United Nations. So Eritrea, for it takes that position because they believe that for us, we can't compromise in this particular situation. But when it comes to the issue of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, of course, South Africa has to play a little bit carefully when it comes to that issue, because it doesn't want to contradict and have that friction with the ECOWAS.
Okay, great then. SA did South Africa, this is W, South Africa did do South Africa did do Africa very proud at the BRICS summit, but we still have to maintain a careful watch because apartheid Dutch still control the South Africa economy. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, when it comes, that is why I always applaud. In the past, I've been, people who are in particular countries, like people who are from Kenya, they tend to passionately criticize, for example, Kenya. If you are from Kenya, like if somebody is from South Africa, they passionately criticize, like, for example, the ANC. Or if you find somebody from Uganda or from Ghana, if they're criticizing their government, they passionately criticize it like it is nothing completely, it is not doing anything. But this is where I've been having a different, train or sort of lot of thought, a different point of view with people, especially when it comes to South Africa, because I recognized when South Africa in 2021, when South Africa started to intervene in the issue of Ethiopia and how it was resisting the pressure from the United States, I saw that this country is run by neo-colonial institutions. And this has been actually a major challenge for Pan-Africanists, even themselves, to understand, analyze, and be accurate in their analysis, or be a little bit precise, not accurate, but at least relatively precise in their analysis to understand the situation and how to deal with it, because it is from this analysis that you find how to deal with the situation, to be able to understand that the government, the ANC government, is operating within confined position. It is really confined, and that is the position from which we criticized Nigeria, that Nigeria, it doesn't have so much problems compared to the South African government. You know, when it comes to the control of the economy, the South African government, the ANC, doesn't control any part of the economy almost. The biggest part of the economy are controlled by colonialists. Their companies are coming from the West, from Europe and the United States. And this is different from when you come to Nigeria. But when you look at the ANC, to a certain extent, has been able to have some achievements, to play and make some achievements in this confined environment where you don't control the economy, where the economy can even be used against you. It has been able to make some achievements, some tremendous, some laudable achievements. So that is where I think that we need sometimes to give credit where credit is due. That in this case, South Africa has been able to do Africa proud. You know, it has been able to play to a certain extent that really Africa has been made proud by the position of the ANC, and I think we need to appreciate that.
All right. Okay, so good. I agree with you because we have followed. That's how actually me and Kwame met that particular challenge that Ethiopia has been facing, pressure from the Western world. Really to throw the government and to destabilize the country. I mean, changing the government is one thing, to destabilize the country. So we have fought our. I think we can look back and say, yes, on the government level, people like Ramaphosa have really helped. He played a great role in bringing that peace talk, both for Nile, actually, between Egypt and Ethiopia, and also regarding between Ethiopia and the rebels in the northern part of the world. So he really did a good job. Some leaders might not be accepted. There might be a problem. No perfect leader, you know. Inside we criticize them for this and that, but we need to give them their credit also for the role they are playing in Africa, in bringing Africa together for, you know, whatever. It could be solving a problem of neighboring countries or anything. They need to be applauded for that. Okay. Mikey said NATO didn't need to pretend why it hasn't upgraded since the Second World War. It was created by the West to benefit only the West. So yeah, it remains the same. It's being loyal. Indonesia is very local about BRICS, but I don't know if Indonesia applied.
Indonesia applied, but I think according to their criteria, as you have seen, one of the first things which was mentioned was that there was a criteria which was established of admitting, but this does not mean that they are not going to admit more. They are going to admit more members, but I think at this point they had to admit, you know, based on a certain criteria and based on the resources which they currently have and how they want to run maybe the bank. Probably they wanted members who are able to support the economic structure of BRICS, you know, how it is. So, but I think that this does not mean that they're not going to admit more. There will be another round of admission of other members. So I think they want to see how it is going to go. But I think Indonesia applied to be, you know, admitted also. And there was discussions. I think I also spoke about it. There was discussions that it was possible that Indonesia could be admitted during this time, but it was postponed. That it could be admitted during the second round of admissions. All right. And of course, this could make also Asia have three. This could make Asia also have three members, just like Africa has three, Middle East has three, and of course, I think they could admit on the next round. They could admit maybe probably two more, so that Latin America could have three Middle East 3, Africa 3, and Asia 3. And I think with that, they would maybe hold off a little bit and monitor and see how it will go and build from there.
Okay, so BRICS, the name, the abbreviation the acronym might not expand, but the membership will expand. So I think it will remain as BRICS Plus. We call it BRICS Plus from now.
Everyone is just waiting to see what they are going to come up with.
No,
so
no acronym. I think let it wait. Let it be. Just a quick thing. The name BRIC is actually invented by an American, George something, but that's for another day. Anyway, many English African-speaking countries are sleeping while British and Americans are exploiting them, stealing their resources. Yeah, we are so busy talking about the French colonial tax in West Africa. It's the same everywhere. Ethiopia is a huge player of BRICS. We do believe that. Let's hope it will play what it is expected from it. See, and this, you are okay. You are upset. Something, a reply. Very proud of South Africa and its president for their part in the BRICS summit. They have distinguished themselves on the global stage and made Africa to shine. Yes, I mean, applause for South Africa. Still, we must watch South Africa carefully. Don't forget, these Dutch apartheid people have a huge control. Okay, it's the same thing. You have reflected on it, Kwame, so no need. Kagoma said, glad Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are waking the whole continent. Rise Africa. Yeah, now we are caught up by BRICS, but we are going to back to Niger and update you. There are things happening on daily basis. We don't want it to be the forgotten struggle, like what's happening in Sudan right now.
Don't forget we want to do a program on India. We want to analyze India's media platform and how the West, of course, has been terrified by the success.
Yeah,
how India has been
successful. India versus Africa. So if you have any area that you want us to touch on that, it's gonna be soon. So please, when this stream is over, put in the comment section or even in the chat section as we speak now. So we take it from there. Okay. The more I hear, this is OCA saying
the elections are here. Zimbabwe is having elections. It had elections yesterday. Yeah, so I think we need to come up probably next week and reflect on Zimbabwe's elections.
Nice. Now our viewers are part of our planning now.
yeah. So ZANU-PF is of the party which, of course, President.
Speaking of Zimbabwe, I really wanted you to reflect why they didn't take Zimbabwe. Somebody asked it. Maybe I'm gonna get the question.
No, Zimbabwe still has a lot of challenges. Zimbabwe still has a lot of challenges.
Is it the sanction? What is mainly the problem, really?
The problem, of course, is the land that the African people were able to take back the land from the colonialists. That's why the sanctions were applied on Zimbabwe. The colonialists still think that they have a right to Africa's resources, and this is one of the things that
the very sanctions that it has, it should make it for it to be welcomed by BRICS. No.
Yeah, of course it should, but the population is very small. And we have seen the economy is also very small compared to, Egypt, more than $400 billion, Ethiopia, more than $120 billion. So you can see the kind of countries which have been admitted in the fold. They are very, very strong, very competitive. So I believe that it's possible they could admit Zimbabwe also, but in the next round.
Interesting to see Ruto. No, I'm just jumping to the next thing. Ruto did not attend, and Tinubu also.
Yeah, so that is what
I don't want to put them in the same basket. I still want to give a benefit of a doubt to Ruto. Even Nana Akufo-Addo attended.
Nana Akufo-Addo, interesting. I think that President Ruto should have attended this. I really don't see any reason why President Ruto should not have attended. And they are very close with President Ramaphosa. They are very close. I really don't get it.
commenting.
That is why people have started having question marks on President Ruto. People have put question marks on President Ruto and saying maybe it was a fake Pan-Africanist and he, trying to use Pan-Africanism and stuff like that. But we will see. Time will tell. Of course, time is still
It's
there.
good also
We
to
don't
give
want to reach.
sometimes the benefit of the doubt and see what's going on, what kind of pressure is imposed upon them. The West will not sleep really. So definitely the things that he has said will put his life in danger,
Absolutely.
let alone his power.
Yeah, a lot of threats, like what you said, you're right. A lot of threats might have come with that, and then he's trying to reflect on the threats which are coming. They may have come because they have been coming to him. Definitely, the United States has been
their
frequent.
audacity. They are stupid. They might come and tell you through their ambassador or whatever, do not attend. Like as if that's
so they could be issuing some threats, and maybe he would maybe not have that a stamina to withstand this the pressure, like how you see maybe Abiy or how you see President Ramaphosa. President Ramaphosa, even when he was speaking, you could see that he was really tired of the pressure. He was really tired. You could see it in his face that he's really tired of dealing with these kind of people who are always not trying to behave in a human way, or these kind of people who don't want a just society. For us to have a society which is just for everyone, where people are equal, where humans are looked at as equal, but you have a group of people, they always want to dominate. So this can wear you out as a human being, and you are like, which kind of people are these? Which type of people are these that we are living with in this world, that they think that the only way to live is for them to always dominate others and bully others and denigrate others and look down on others. I mean, this is not a society which we want to live. We want to live with a society where we respect each other. But I mean, it's problematic. So you could see that on his face when he was speaking, President Cyril Ramaphosa. So it can really be difficult.
Yeah. Just to add on that one, the audacity, and even for them to use the words of Her Excellency Madame Chiambori Kwao, that the fact that they are able, this France and other, America, all the collective West who is exploiting Africa, for them to go every single day to their bed peacefully, thinking that this will continue and people will not wake up. One thing is, okay, we should reflect on ourselves. I mean, why we are not waking up. Second, it's just, wow. Yeah, speechless. OCS says the more I hear about Algeria, the more I like them. Yes, there's this hasty generalization. The northern part is really not that African or Pan-African. But as in one of his comments, saying this, whom I accidentally banned him from commenting, pointed out that I think from the how many countries was it 8 or something, the founding members of during the time of Kwame Nkrumah and Emperor Haile Selassie, so there were 3 northern African countries. That's
the non-aligned movement, the non-aligned movement, which was found by the Bandung conference. Ghana was part, Algeria too was part, and Egypt also was part. So the 2 northern African countries was Egypt and Algeria.
Yeah, Algeria, even here, in Europe, they have really a strong opposition to to France, and every time they make sure, whenever there's something at the EU in Brussels, I mean, I see them differently than other, whether it's Morocco or
so in majority of those Western countries, those kind of people, I think they are the ones who we need to seek out and work with them. But in majority of those countries, they still for them, they still for those voices which oppose the imperialism, the neoliberal system. Of course, you can speak of people like people like this guy who has been banned of WikiLeaks, the guy from WikiLeaks. What is his name?
William
No, the WikiLeaks WikiLeaks guy. What is his name? I've forgotten.
Assange?
Julian Assange, yes, Julian Assange. So you can speak of people like Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, you know, all these people are silenced when they come out to, you know, people like the former Greek finance minister, what is his name? I've forgotten his name. So these are the people who are in opposition to this system. So those who are there, they are normally silenced. They deny them these platforms. And so that dissent is within there, is normally boiling within the country. But those ones who, many of them agree with the behavior of the West, that they should be colonialists and dominate the world. So I really don't think that even we should be using the word domination, Western domination. Dominate for what? So for you to think that you should dominate others, then you have to think of yourself as a superior person. But we are talking about human rights. Everyone has equal rights. So if you say that you want to dominate, then are you a narcissist or what? I mean, you are. This is Nazism. This is what we were talking about, Hitler. The same ideology which they are carrying, these people, is the Hitler ideology, but they're hiding it. And that is why you hear them talking about Western domination, challenging Western domination. So why should you be dominating others if they are equal to you? If all of you are equal human beings, why should you be thinking about dominating others? So these are Nazis. You know, these are Nazis, you know, like how you see Hitler. They carry the same ideology like Hitler. They still carry the colonial DNA. They still carry the DNA of enslaving others. That's why they go around like that. But they hide between and behind democracy. That is where they hide, and they will be pushing this narrative. So the dissent within is always silenced. So that is what happens there.
Okay, so W says Nigeria. I just love this. Nigeria like a mid-get when it should be a giant. And then OCA says Nigeria often talks pro-Africa and pro-Black, but they never miss an opportunity. But they never miss an opportunity to sell out for $2 or less. Just have to laugh. And Osie, I think he's from Nigeria, or she, I don't know. Please say something. Okay, I don't know if I have to say this, but only the cartoon characters in charge of Nigeria, not the citizens. True.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mikey, this is Mikey. He also said, "Okay, Mahlet, you look great when you had dreadlocks. Still looks lovely. Thank you very much." And yeah, I miss my locks, but yeah, I think maybe it's an age thing. I don't know. But thank you for your being honest comment. Osie said, I am sad to say the Nigerian government is totally untrustworthy. It's not nice to say, but it is the truth. Even, yeah, Nigeria is deprived of some good leaders, but I mean, you bring this on yourself, really. I
No,
like, eh?
it's a difficult situation. Nigeria's issue is a very difficult situation. The people have attempted to
For
remove
how
that.
many years? Those
Yes,
people are really,
there's a lot
they're
of
very
huge interest.
outspoken. They can go on the streets. They
Yes,
can do things.
they have tried, I'm telling you, but there's a lot of interest by the West. So the West is always backing, you know, has captured, the West has captured the military and has captured the government. So the military does what the West wants. And that is why you are seeing, even with the issue of Niger, that they are the ones who are, you know, coming up on top and always trying to direct where to go, even though they have failed to remove Boko Haram. So they are saying that they can defeat Niger and Mali and Burkina Faso. The people who have failed to defeat Boko Haram. So it's laughable. So the people have tried that. I think that to a certain extent, Nigeria will need help from the, you know, the larger African, you know, world from outside to be able to remove those criminals.
That has, you know, so much talented people. How come you cannot
So
have
many. Nigeria has some of the best intellectuals, some of the best, you know,
and very outspoken. These people are
very
not.
good
We just
people can speak well. Look at Tinubu. Look at Tinubu. He cannot even speak and represent the country. Look at Buhari.
Joke.
When you speak, is very problematic, man. It's very problematic that you have the worst, the worst are the ones who have captured the country and are in control. It's very difficult.
Yeah, it's really such a joke. Somebody told me from Nigeria, I have no words, but just a joke to Tinubu. Anyway, I like the selection of Ethiopia and Egypt together, although I am not too excited about Egypt. Let's see, maybe this is a good opportunity. Black says, I bet the West will do everything to remove South African president and Ethiopian PM. Ethiopian PM when their next respective elections arrive. You never know. Okay. I think we have to leave as well. We try to cover as much as possible. If there's anything, any question we didn't answer, we will do it in the comment section when this streaming is over. Sorry, yeah. 2 hours and 25 minutes. Also, Kwame has to leave. It's midnight, 17 minutes past midnight also by me. So yeah, thank you very much really for tuning in. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kwame, for staying.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Please subscribe to our channel, Connect Africa, and support the work which we are doing. Then we will also be energized to go forward. Our PayPal account is in the description. So go ahead and support us, and most of all, send this channel to others and invite others to the channel so that they can be able to enjoy the African narrative. They can be able to enjoy the African analysis of events, global events, and so that we can push forward the African agenda. So we thank you, all of you who have been with us. Continue to support us. Do not stop.
Oh, thank you. You're here. I'm happy. Okay, good. All right. Yeah, so ciao. Please do share this video.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.